Holy fucking carp fishing way. Remember this cop? Well, you should, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't, I'll refresh your memory right here on the spot. So we got an update about this guy. Remember, this cop was, he catfished a teenager. Well, guess what? Supposedly, catfishing cop groomed another victim for years. What? Yep, he did. Cop groomed another teen for years before killing family. That's right. And here's the more of the story. Before he became a cop, he catfished another teen for years. Let's get to it, shall we?
Earlier, late last year, rather. Remember, we covered it about a Virginia police officer drove across the country, killing 3 relatives of a 15-year-old girl he catfished online. And now we know she was not his first victim.
Here we go.
A woman is now claiming the same cop tried to groom her nearly a decade ago when she was just 13.
Whoa!
This woman said,
"Well, yeah, fuck."
Austin Lee Edwards on the news.
Yeah.
She began to
This
cry.
is the cop that drove the Riverside, killed her family, set the house on fire.
Times on video chats nearly a decade ago when she was just a young teenager.
Wow.
That from Riverside Police.
Yep, Riverside.
13-year-old
Same area where Salty Rant lives.
First met in October 2014. Online platform that randomly pairs users to communicate. Just one day later, October 25th, 2014, they began talking on Skype. Pair initially bonded over memes, the woman said. Okay. But the conversation very quickly turned
sexual. Hear that?
In messages, Edwards would also repeatedly drop homophobic and racist slurs, including the N-word. But he also seemed to be under the false impression that the girl he was chatting with was black. You're black, he wrote.
You're black, right?
He wrote on October
29, 2014.
I have jungle fever. Let's do this.
Wow.
Edwards was unaware the woman, who was white, was a minor. When they first began chatting, he would often wait for her to finish school in order to video chat or to respond to messages.
Dude, I don't know how the hell this guy became a cop. You're going to find out why. You're going to find out how he became a cop. But holy fuck, man. The fact that he catfished a couple teens, you know, the way he's, talks sexual like this guy is a fucking creep. Well, was a creep because he's dead now.
Los Angeles Times reviewed nearly 4,000 messages provided by the woman that offered deep insight into Edwards' psyche. The messages show Edwards repeatedly pressured her to share nude photos of herself, even after she disclosed that she was barely a teenager.
Yes.
The woman told the Times that she shared with Edwards nude photos of herself when she was a child.
Holy fuck!
Conversations often delved into suicide, self-harm. Edwards would say she was the only person he had and would threaten to kill himself if she ever stopped talking to him, the woman recalled. He would often show off his handgun and knife collection over video, she said.
Fuck, I had an ex-girlfriend that did that shit. You know, she would sit there and say if I dumped her. She told me, say, oh, if I ever dumped her, I'll regret it. That if I broke up her, she couldn't live with herself. She would take her own life. That she needs me, that she yearns for me. Yeah.
In 2016, Edwards was detained for psychiatric evaluation after cutting his hand, threatening to kill himself and his father. The woman, then 14, had tried to cut off contact with Edwards less than 2 weeks before he harmed himself. LA Times. After she blocked Edwards on Skype in 2016, the year she turned 15, he continued to send her messages from different Facebook accounts for years. April 2020, after she turned 18, tried to call her on Facebook. According to a screenshot she shared with the Times, she did not pick up. December 2020, he messaged her from a Facebook account. He wrote, "Hey," with a sad face. She messaged back, telling him never to contact her again, and blocked him. A few months after that, Edwards applied to join the Virginia State Police.
Here it comes.
During the hiring process, he disclosed that he had voluntarily checked himself into the mental health facility in 2016. That disclosure should have prompted further investigation. It did not.
You want to hear the reason why he got accepted to be a police officer? Here it comes.
Human error.
Human error.
An incomplete query of databases led to Edwards' application being approved.
There you have it.
From a spokeswoman with the Virginia State Police. Of course, it would be too late. Edwards would go on to catfish a 15-year-old girl.
Yep. And you remember this?
Where she lived.
That's the girl's family.
Set their bodies on fire, kidnapped the teenager, then took his own life.
That's the aunt, the grandmother, and the father.
Rescued by police. Ravana, I don't know where you'd like to start here. You have an even younger victim, and we don't know when the 15-year-old, at least I don't have it in front of me, the one that was rescued, that grooming began, but it just seems like there's steps all along the way.
Yeah, and
but
he kidnapped her,
Virginia State Police,
and he got to a shootout with San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, where he ultimately died from a gunshot.
2016, checking into a facility there. Your reaction to learning more, because to me there's got to be other people out there that he's done this to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good time to highlight what I think is a concerted effort that's been going on by predominantly right-wing individuals to undermine the true definition of grooming. And they'll conflate taking your child to a family-friendly drag show or, you know, even just loving and accepting your queer child as grooming when this...
You know, I'll bring up another point, too, about what people think about grooming as well. Is, you know, like when... Trying to groom somebody like with gifts or take him to, like, you know, you showing affection and love for, you know, a child or a teenager as well. No, grooming is when you're trying to do, when you're grooming them is trying, when you're proposing unwanted sexual advances, you know, trying to get sexual favors and like that when they're uncomfortable.
Is what grooming actually is.
Yes.
Is ingratiating yourself with a young person.
Yeah.
And trying to form some sort of dependence with them, and then further.
Like, and then you sit there and say, like, I was like, oh, I said, you're the reason why I'm still alive. You know, like I said, I had an ex-girlfriend that did that shit with me. No, she wasn't like trying to groom me, but that she would realize, you know, I'm the reason why she's alive. That, oh, I'm the reason why she's doing better. You know, I don't know. You know, I mean, I'd never flaked her off. I mean, I loved her the way she is, but she would portray like a depression, like she's like has mental issues, all kind of stuff like that.
Bring it into, you know, making sexual inquiries of them and demanding sexually explicit pictures from them.
Yeah, exactly.
And what this is
making unwanted sexual advances.
But what's also horrifying is that he was allowed to become a police officer in the first place.
Because of technical human error.
Are there background checks for hiring officers that they couldn't find anything on this man that...
Not only that was usually, and if I can remember correctly, most of the time, if not all the time, when you become a police officer, you go through a thorough research and background check, even taking a lie detector test. And the fact, you know, is there was I mean, I don't know if he went through that thorough background before he became a police officer and grooming another teenager.
That would alert them to the fact that, you know, he's one, racist, because he was pretty explicit in his racism, so I'm sure...
Yeah, and then number one, he's racist. Number two, you know, he's a sexual deviant predator. And number three, I mean, this guy was unstable from the word go. And the fact he's sitting there trying to groom on a teenager makes him a bona fide creep.
Sure, it wasn't just in these online chats.
Yes.
Two, that he was a child predator.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, it's concerning that if they had found it, what would they have done? If maybe they didn't find anything in their background checks of him when they allowed him to become a police officer, you know, but I can't imagine that with the resources that they had, that they weren't even made aware of any of this going on.
Oh, it's easy to do research on somebody. You can do a background check.
That, you know, that they concealed. There's so much more to the story, but it's truly horrifying. I'm thankful that the 13-year-old victim and the 15-year-old victim made it out safely, but of course that can't be said for the 15-year-old victims' families.
Yeah, what is she going through right now? Because we can't even discuss the one feeling.
She lost 3 family members.
To go through this horrificness, it's just outrageous. Does it bear more mention that this guy was so dogged in the pursuit here, relentless, going on for years, and it's just further indication that, you know, yeah, we could teach our kids to advocate for themselves. But this 13 when it began, 18 when she finally tells him, don't you contact me again. She finally has enough voice to say, and listen, there's 35-year-olds that can't escape, this kind of scum. But does that bear more repeating and mentioning, unpacking, if you will?
I think it absolutely does. And I think it really begins with proper education because, oftentimes children or, victims in general, no matter how old they are, will blame themselves for a long time and they'll view it as they have done something wrong. Growing up, I had a friend who was the victim of the same sort of grooming that happened from the same platform, actually, and it went on for years. And she was so concerned that she was going to be held criminally liable, for what was going on. She just didn't have the education. No one was informing her that she was the victim. So it's really, it's a culture of blaming victims for their abuse, and it starts at a very young age. So it's a conversation that needs to be had, from the ground on up.
Well, that's the thing too as well. I mean, I think it's so funny when you get a registered sex offender or a child molester out there. They sit there blaming their victims like, oh, it was their fault. Oh, really? Was it their fault? Was it their fault that... I'd say, how is it their fault? It's not their fault that you took advantage of them. It's not their fault that they didn't want you. Oh, and you say, well, the way she dressed or she was asking. No. You took advantage of her. You groomed her, buddy. You did it. You done fucked up. See, and that's the easiest route for a sex offender can do, or a child groomer out there to do, is blame the victim. That's why That's why victims have a voice out there to speak their mind. That's why there's a such thing as called the Me Too movement.
Starting from a young age on up, so that these victims know that there are resources. But there's also the issue of a lot of victims go to the police and nothing is done. So it's really a deep issue that needs to be addressed.
That's why sometimes when you get levels. Females out there,
I remember covering a story.
I don't victims of grooming or sexual or rape like that, they blame this all that.
Grown women
it's my
with
fault.
criminal
It's not your fault.
records because as teens they were exploited. Children, right? Prostitution on their record for teenagers. Okay, that's not called prostitution. It's called rape. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a.
No, that's called human trafficking. That's exactly what you get these pimps and johns out there.
Respect thing. The other thing that I wanted to go back to is, again, from the Virginia State Police spokeswoman, where they talk about how he voluntarily checked himself into the mental health facility.
That's a bullshit lie.
That should have triggered further investigation. There's this thing in this country where mental health is all-encompassing. And it means that you are a threat and you're a risk to society. That's not... you should just use words like mental health and say, whoa, that should trigger this. What about what Dr. Ritchie often talks about on this show, which is a full workup? Who are you? What makes you tick? Shouldn't we all, whether you've been to a mental health facility or maybe struggled with a bout of depression, shouldn't everybody, if you want to be a police officer and target others and...
I think another thing as well, too, I have touched up about this as well before in previous videos, is sometimes some of the officers, why they become officers, you know why? Because they were bullied and they're picked on in high school and in middle school. So they become officers to fight back. They're thinking, okay, I was a victim, so I'm going to be bully and fight back and strike back at people. I'm going to be a corrupt, downright dirty, vicious cop out there that bully and harass people just for the hell of it, because I can. And you got cause because I got a badge and a gun in Europe because I can.
Police others, shouldn't you have to jump through more hoops than currently? What's going on?
Yeah.
And Dr. Rashad has touched upon us. You don't talk about you don't reform dirty cops out there. You replace them. You cannot reform a corrupt, trigger happy cop out there. You don't reform that shit. You tell them goodbye. We'll get a cop that cares about the community, that's willing to go out there and do what's right, the duty, instead of you got these dirty cops out there. It's all about loyalty or about, I'm a cop and these citizens, they're just my punching bags, my chew rags.
Absolutely, and I think because there's such a stigmatization of mental health in society that people are fearful of even reaching out to get those resources. But those resources can be, instrumental in helping you recover and learn from what's going on and learn more about yourself. So I'm not saying that nobody who's ever checked into a mental health facility would be able to, go on and get a job, even working in the police. But there definitely needs to be a conversation about how it's okay to reach out for those resources. But when it comes to being put into a position of power, like being a police officer, they should just be having those checkups, and they should have, maybe even mandatory therapy sessions for all their officers continuously, so that they can make sure that they are in the right state of mind to be in that position of authority, because so often they are not. And you see them, use that as a justification for when they do something wrong in their position. Well, I was just so stressed, I was overworked, yada, 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 which could be true. But if they are having these continuous checkups, you can prevent that from happening in the first place.
Boy, I think you should be in charge of some kind of uniform, entryway here. And I think you're exactly right. We hear intelligence agencies who have these kind of random checks, if you will, where they go through things again. Perhaps you have to have some kind of a lie detector test.
There you go, things. Right there. I'll talk about that.
If police are going through so much on the job with that trauma, then...
I think one thing as well, besides the lie detector test, I think when you, you have a annual period, or a cop, I don't know, it's like maybe 3 months, 6 months, or something like that, where I think a cop should go through a psychological, background, like a test, to see, if they're capable of going on the street or being a police officer, how do we react to citizens or crime out there. Are they going to be triggered? Are they going to be quick to pull the gun? That's the kind of psychological background, and run through a lie detector test as well to see what the stable mind of these cops are. Think about that. With that said, I'm out of here. My job. Peace out.